Reclaiming American history is specific to that photo of the recreation of the 1869 Transcontinental Railroad and
Mm.
Promontory Summit, but it has everything to do with the point of the film, which is photographic justice, right? It was him saying like the Chinese Americans were not represented in that original photo. They were
Mm.
not allowed to be a part of it.
Jennifer, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you. I really do appreciate it. The film is lovely.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Photographic Justice is an absolutely beautiful film. How did it come to be? Where did it begin?
So it was a very random, like I was going to do 5 minute vignettes on people in New York that had like singular visions. And I just happened to meet Corky in a random event. And I asked him, I didn't know him. I asked him where the bathroom was. And then he didn't know. And he was like, this is the history of the building. It could be on another floor for men's. And I was just like, who are you? Just show me the bath. Anyway, so that's how we met. And then he started telling me about all these things that he's doing. And I thought, you're so fascinating. And so I started to film him.
What was the time frame for that? I'll because I'll be honest, watching the film, I was amazed at how much footage you had of him, and it seemed to go back 10 years, but I didn't know how much of that was you. Like how long was your relationship with him?
So I started filming him in 2003. So it was 19 years of filming. And it's been 21 years to get it to this point.
That's incredible. What that is absolutely incredible to me.
Yeah, we had
Um,
vintage footage in there from the 80s, but I was not there to shoot that.
right. No,
Not that
there are
old.
moments I could sense that, there was stuff there that I could feel was like from somewhere else, but it just sensed like this film was a long journey with him.
Yeah, Corky and I both had long journeys together.
What strikes you about Corky? What is it about him that makes him so unique?
Oh my God, everything, everything. I really love Corky. I love that he and I tend to speak to him about him in the present. So just like I realize that now. But yeah, I love everything about him. I think that he is a fascinating character because he was so singular minded. Like, despite having a family, he didn't spend a lot of time with his family. Like he knew he had a mission, and in his head, he would like just shoot whatever it is, whatever it could be a play, it could be with Asian Americans, it could be a protest, it could be a cultural event somewhere, like it could be a meeting, like he used to shoot some of the organization's meetings and things and like, but he just weddings, like he shot everything. And he didn't always get paid. But he just was so committed to doing what he did. And his whole thing was to accumulate this archive that he could continue to push those images into mainstream media because he really felt like the images out there weren't representing AAPIs. So he just took it in his own hands and did it.
And you know what? That comes across in this film. Like there, you can sense a burden on him. This is something he has to do. I think in the beginning of the film, he even says, like, if I'm not going to do it, who will? Or maybe
Mhm.
that at some point he says that.
Very true. He would, yeah.
What in your mind, like, what is, how can I ask this well? Um, what, one second. Whoop. At one point in the film, the phrase reclaiming American history is used. And I was wondering what that phrase means to you and how it is associated with his photography.
Reclaiming American history is specific to that photo of the recreation of the 1869 Transcontinental Railroad and
Mm.
Promontory Summit, but it has everything to do with the point of the film, which is photographic justice, right? It was him saying like the Chinese Americans were not represented in that original photo. They
Mm.
were not allowed to be a part of it. So what he did was he took it upon himself to get Asian Americans in the picture and retook that same photo. So he is reclaiming American history in that respect, right? They weren't allowed to be part of it, and so he did it on his own to make it happen.
But it's interesting because I feel like there's so much of that embedded in his work across the board. Like the film, the photos of in 9/11. He made sure that he was taking photos of. I think he says the point when you think of frontline workers, you think of white people. But I wanted to make sure that people knew that that was not the case, or only the case, I should say.
Right. No, absolutely. So representation was everything to him in his photos. Also, if you look, like there was that whole thing about Confucius Plaza and the building of Confucius Plaza. That's a giant building. Like I don't know like how many stories it is, but it's a huge building. And it takes up a lot of the space in Chinatown. So back in the day when they were building it, to have no construction workers that were Asian American was like was another rallying cry, right? Like for the community. And that actually was one of the first times that the one of the interviewees, Joanne Lee, says that she saw Corky, with a camera, because that really was like, again, there was no representation. They're building in our community and this big building. But back then, a lot of construction workers were, it was handed down of a generation and they weren't Asian. Like it wasn't an Asian American trade. So
Well, one of the other in that regard, in that respect, one of the things I thought was so interesting about this film, it talks about that his work was a service to his country, or a service to my country, he says when he's talking about it. I was wondering, in your mind, in what ways was it? I mean, certainly the Asian representation is essential to that, but how is it a service to the country?
it's a service to the country because he was an American history major, right? So when you're a history major and your story isn't in that in that representation, I think representation matters in that respect. And like just not having like omitting the stories that are part of history, American history in the textbooks, that's exactly why he did what he did. So yeah, I think it extended to a national aspect for him because he really did feel it was a disservice, not just to the AAPIs, but non-AAPIs. If you're American, this is history. We're not making this up, right? He's trying to just say that this is what really happened. This is, another side that's not in there. So yeah, I do think that, he is very much a nationwide kind of guy. Like he saw a very big picture. It also happened to be the way that his name is in Chinese, by the way, was like,
That
about doing good for the nation. So yeah, it he kind of lived his up to his name.
Wow, absolutely. Um, it's amazing because he's in these spaces. This is, forgive me, this question is so ridiculous to me, but over the span of time, he just seems to be everywhere. How did he know what was going on? Like he seems to be just it's like he had his own personal bat phone and he'd be, I'll be back in a couple of days, and he'd be gone.
It was his personality. He really was everywhere. So then people would talk to him about different events that were going on. And then he just kept like meeting new people. And then he would introduce people to other people that thought that they should be at that event. And he was just that guy that kind of like had everyone's phone number, everyone's like messaging in his head. He was like a walking billboard for the community. And it was such an important role, right? Especially back in the day when they didn't have phones. Like Corky was that guy. And he would always like send out postcards or notes to each other, or like he would send out, I know I got like mail from him just saying like, hey, this is like, I like dumplings, and he sent me information on like some dumpling places that had opened up, or like I filmed him at the dumpling eating contest. Like he's just a really caring, wonderful person that we were all very fortunate to know.
He really seems like he impacted everybody that he came in contact with. And his photos, I think he makes the point. It's interesting. I think he says sometimes it takes 10 years for his photos to get recognized, because people now looking back at history and saying, we want to revisit those moments.
Yeah. It's true. And that was, that really was the case with like, Vincent Chin. Like, that
Yeah.
was the example that we showed. But it's also just that after 10 years, people start asking him for
Yeah.
photos, because then their kids are old enough and they'd say like, oh, I was in that protest photo. Can I get a copy of it? Because my kid's in a college now, or my kid's in high school and wants to see it. That kind of a thing happened a lot. But then, can you imagine the responsibility? Like you take these photos, but then everyone's going to want the photos, right? Or people are going to want you to show up to show the photos. So you're not only expected to take the photos to document the events, but then you're also going to be there at the anniversary of the events or give them to individuals for. So, I don't know how he did what he did, but he did. And he really mattered to the community.
One of the comments I absolutely love in this film is towards the end of the film. It says, if you see yourself as a fireman, then you do what a fireman does. you show up. Um, and I guess I would say, looking at that, a statement like that, if a fireman is saving the day, um, how do you think Corky will be remembered? How are his photos saving the day?
Because he showed up and he has this remarkable bank of historical photos that can be used for future generations in any story that's written in future textbooks, any kind of historian that writes about things that they want to see, like the garment industry in Chinatown, if they want to see, a cultural parade to show something that was happening, or a story that has really nothing to do with the cultural, like, in Chinatown. It's like it just represents Chinese culture. Like Corky's going to have those images that people can relate to. And I think that he did that on purpose, right? In his head, he has an image that means so much and has this whole backstory, but it's going to mean something very different to, in different contexts. And he was okay with it. That's why he did it. He wanted to have an archive that can be used so that these images won't be stereotypical. They're not going to be, uh, images that don't make sense to the community. Corky was very much part of the community, and he knew the images that would be important and that mattered.
He has an incredible eye. Like, quite frankly, he seems to know how to make something, how to tell a story with one click of his finger is just incredible to see. And challenge the way that we've seen events before in doing so at the same time.
Yeah, because he was an artist and a photographer and a documentarian. So he combined all of his knowledge together to make that happen, right? I think that's why it's so special, because when you would listen to him, it wasn't just about the juxtaposition of things, but it was also about the colors, or like the like a it could be a tablecloth and the specifications of the way the tablecloth looked against whatever it was. Like in his head, he had a whole story. So we've lost that in that respect, but I don't think that that's what was important to him, right? It was more that that image would be there to tell a different story for someone else.
And I think that's so powerful. Like the power of a storyteller cannot be understated, for good or for bad. And I absolutely appreciate this film and the opportunity to sort of engage Corky a little bit through the film, because he is shedding light on stories in a completely new way in some ways. And it's powerful. I honestly, Jennifer, it is a beautiful film.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for the time.
We thank you for the time and for getting our message out. We couldn't be
Absolutely.
thrilled.